Hello, welcome to the barn. My name is Joanne Knight. I'm going to do a series of barn buddies on this quilt right here. It is one of my favorite and has always been. A little backup history on this quilt is that these blocks were made by the Southern Bells. They were given to me as an anniversary gift. There were two quilts, one in 2016 and one in 2017. In 2016, the Bells got together and did a sampler quilt. When I got additional blocks in 2017, I decided I wanted them to be also a sampler quilt, but in a little bit different setting than the first one because I wanted to challenge myself. It is huge. It's 99 by 99. What I decided to do was quilt it in a round robin with the Southern Belle. This block was made by Debbie Tribble in the center, and I named it Pay It Forward because I wanted it to look like a ripple effect going out in all directions, in that if you teach one person, then that person teaches someone else and someone else and someone else. It's a little bit mushy, I know, but that was my vision for this quilt. I love the way that it turned out. All of these white spaces were treated as borders. So what I did with it was quilt the blocks, quilt the sashing or the setting triangles, and then quilt the white spaces in borders. And I did that as I got to each row. This is a picture of row 1 and what that row looked like. So this pattern right here, which is a pattern by Kim Diamond, was repeated in all of the outside white spaces of the quilt. It gives you a little better look of it right here. This is the row 1, and then this is row 2 and row 3. So whatever is in this white space is going to be mimicked on the right side and left side and on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is take one row at a time and show you what I did in each of the blocks in that row. And then whenever I get to the end, I'll show you how I did the borders to be able to set it up. This block on the left side over here is one that was done by Carol Kosman, and this is the final quilting of that block. The one that's on the far right side is the Southern Belle block that's in the top right corner, and that was done by Joan Oldham. I know the names of some of the people that gave me these blocks, but I don't know all of them, and I hate that, but I don't. So what we're going to do is take the first one, which is going to be Carol's right here. Let me also show you a picture of the whole quilt after it was quilted. It was accepted into Paducah. It was my first quilt accepted into Paducah, and it got to hang in Paducah. And as I told Dusty, it's not about winning to me in Paducah. It's about getting to Paducah. You can see how the borders are mimicked on this one in the white spaces. That gives you a real good look on that. So let's get to row 1 and let me show you how I did that. I'm going to scroll in really close. Let me go to view and make sure that my view alls are turned off because I don't want it to go closer every time. What I did was an outside boundary of the seam lines of the block. And then I did a boundary of these points on the Dresden. So let me move all of this out of the way because I quilted the background areas first. That's the way that I think that it stabilizes that block to be able to do that. So I try my best to always start with the outside background areas. I'm going to go right in here and I'm going to find Anita's pattern. And it's called Trim Background Grid and Frame Large, if you look at the name of it. But just because it says trim doesn't mean it cannot be used as a fill. What I like about this pattern, let me get rid of this guy right here. And let me get rid of a lot of these things so it's a lot easier for you to see. When you take this pattern and you put this pattern onto the screen, and I do a virtual stitch out when F2 is your shortcut on that, I'm going to hit my plus key to speed it up. You're going to see that this pattern, though it looks like the lines go all the way through, they really don't. They stop and they go back on themselves, and that's what keeps it from doing so much overstitching in fill. It's really, really smart to be able to do that way. So I'm going to hit escape. I did not want these scalloped edges on it, so what I did was bring this pattern over my boundary. I'm going to switch to my F8 handles, and I am lining up as best I can this pattern, checking the density. That's completely up to you on density. So I'm checking that, and I made it just a little bit smaller because I am looking at these lines in the corners. They're not always going to hit, so you got to decide, do I want them to hit or do I want them purposely to be off in the corners? So once I did that, I have 3 boundaries right here. If I tell CreativeStudio to fill inside now, it fills that outside boundary because it's going in between those two, and it will ignore this inside boundary sometimes. Sometimes it will, and sometimes it won't. So I'm going to hit Control Z, and I'm going to hit the letter K on my keyboard until I get that inside boundary, and I'm going to convert it. Now what I want to do is I want to look really close at this pattern. You see this little line right here? CreativeStudio, when I tell it to fill, because the pattern is going to come in and go back out, it's going to come to this point. It's going to cross or stitch over that boundary to get this little tiny piece right here, and I don't want it to do that. So I'm going to go to nodes. And with nodes, I am holding down my left mouse button and I'm pulling that node out of the way, and I am pulling this node until it is up underneath that boundary. If I change my grid to 1/4 inch, you can see that that little piece right there was going to be so tiny that it doesn't really matter in the scheme of things, and I don't want it there. So I'm going to double check this one. It is off of the boundary, so it's okay. I'm all right with letting that one stitch. This one right here, you see how it crosses over that boundary? That pattern is going to go around that boundary and find that little piece, and it's such a short distance, I do not want it to do that. So holding down my left mouse button, I'm going to drag that node back underneath that boundary. I also have another option. With this one, I can pull it back, but if I do, I am getting rid of this space right here, which is about a 1/2 inch. And I don't want to completely get rid of that, so this time, instead of pulling it back up underneath it, I am just moving it down a little bit. It's going to change the angle of the pattern just the tiniest bit, but it's not going to be noticeable in the overall outcome. This one right here is also going to go around that boundary, but it's a bigger space, so I'm going to slow it down and let it stitch around that boundary right there. Because I used a thread that was an off-white thread, then it's not going to show. This one, as tiny as that piece is, CreativeStudio is going to go and stitch that. So I'm going to pull that one up underneath, And I just walked around these and looked at them, each individual one, and said, okay, what do I want that pattern to do? And what am I okay with it stitching, and what am I not okay with it stitching? You can always hit Control Z. Once you hit fill, you can do Control Z and decide that you want to redo some of those. I'm okay with that. Now, I have two patterns. I have the pattern that is in the center, and I have this pattern on the outside. And this pattern in the center right here goes to all of those pink nodes because I hit fill. So even though I did a Control Z and I converted it, it still changes to those pink nodes. I'm going to tell CreativeStudio to fill inside. I have the pattern selected, not the boundary, and it did a fill inside, and I stitched that one out. So that's the way that I did that right there. Stitch that first. Now what I'm going to do is hit my letter K on my keyboard, and I am going to get rid of this boundary because what I did was do a fill on the inside. I'm going to take that pattern. I want just the pattern. You may have noticed that this boundary right here was bright blue. I don't want the boundary. I only want the pattern, and I'm going to convert it. Let's get rid of this so that you can see it better. And the next thing that I did was take my pattern. I used this little pattern right here by Kim Diamond. And I did my F8 and I brought it down until it fit in one of those Dresden plates. You might find that it's easier to draw a boundary of each one of these blades. It's a little different angle right there. You can tell that. Let me make it just a little bit bigger. And I do typically do a boundary of each one of these blades. Now, the important part of this right here is I want to make sure that these little bottom lines are underneath this circle boundary right here. I could have clicked it point to point because it is a point to point pattern, but if you click that point to point, it's going to maintain the aspect and it's going to cause you a problem. So what I did instead was select the pattern and do circular array. I want 20 copies because it was a 20 blade Dresden. I'm going to uncheck connect, and I'm going to pull these down until they are located in those blades, just like that. And I'm going to say okay. And you can see that I've got all those little jumps right there. Now, what I want to tell you is, yes, you have to take these and you have to adjust them individually, but half of the work is done for you because they are put in pretty close to the right position. So I need to take these and adjust them until they are located in each blade and they fit like they're supposed to. So let me do that for you because I don't want to do a fill on it and confuse you now. So give me just a second to do that. And it's just a matter of making sure that they fit like they need to. Just regular old everyday adjustments. I've got those adjusted for you, and you can see I still have all of those teal markers, which means that each one of these patterns is going to sew individually, and I don't want them to do this. Now, understand this was not a quilt that I knew was going to be quilted in one day, but I felt like that if the Bells thought enough of me to be able to make a block for me, then I wanted to honor them by giving it my very best effort, and I had a vision for this quilt. So what I want to do now is let CreativeStudio do the work for me. I will select all of these patterns, and I will tell CreativeStudio to fill inside And now I have gotten rid of all of the teal markers, and these patterns are going to sew out continuously. And that's the way that I accomplished that on that particular block. Let's get rid of that grid. And you can see how they did all the way around. It's just so pretty. The only thing that I did left was to put this pattern right here. Let's see whose it is. That's one that was a freebie with the siblings. So the only thing that I did then was to take this pattern and to place it in the center of that block and quilt that out, and then this block was done. I loved the way that it ended up and how it turned out. So that's block 1 on row 1. Now I want to go and show you what I did on this block right here, which is Joan's block. This one, I have a pearl fetish, and so I used pearls a lot in this quilt, and I also liked to have it give just a little bit of a modern look in the quilt. So the first thing that I did was use draw arc, because I needed a boundary of where this little southern belle is. So I used draw arc, and I have a barn buddy on that one on YouTube, and I think also on my website. And I did draw arc to trace around the applique in this little block right here, because again, I needed to know where that was positioned. As I said, I have a habit of quilting the background first. So the very first thing that I did, I'm going to get rid of this one, and let's just move this one out of the way for right now. Get rid of this, and this, and these guys. So here is my outline that I did with draw arc. I went around this little applique and did the stitch in the ditch. Then I took this pattern, let me change to F8 handles, placed this pattern right up here in the left corner, a little bit off of what my boundary line is. And then I went to circular array, not 20, thank you. It remembered that I did that for the Dresden. So I'm going to change it to 4. And I'm going to uncheck connect. And I am going to place those in the corners just like that. So I'm going to say okay. If you're part of Skill Builders, you know that Joyce and I do a lot of X boundaries. We like to do that because it shows us where the center is. The other thing that it does is helps you to line up patterns that are going to be on a 45. And that's what I did on this one right here. I need to take this belle, so I'm going to convert her pattern to boundary. Now I've got way too many boundaries, so I'm going to hit my letter K on my keyboard. Give me that, please. Not you, you. And I'm going to delete it because I'm done with that one. I only want to select this one pattern. If I select all 4 of these patterns, what it's going to do is combine them, and I'm going to have stitch in the ditch when I do the fill. I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to say fill inside, and I quilted out these 4 patterns just like that. So let's select them and toggle them as sewn. Then it was just a matter of taking this pattern, which I thought was really pleasing and fit. I'm going to adjust it until it fits in that space, and I'm using my gray handles. Place it in that particular spot. I'm going to do a circular array on that one. Uncheck connect. Place them in the north, south, east, and west. say okay, adjust those if I need to adjust them, and quilt those out. Just that simple. The most tedious part of this block to me, and it was a choice that I decided to make, there was too much open background. So what I did then is take a pattern, let's go find it, this one right here, and it's a pattern by Anita called Modern Greek Key Large Block. I took this pattern and placed it, sized it down, and on this one, what I did was divide it out, because let me show you what happens. If I take this pattern right here and I tell CreativeStudio to fill inside on this one, you see all of those yellow lines going around that little bell applique? That's going to be overstitching. That's exactly what that's going to do. Because of the nature of the pattern. This pattern was not intended to be a fill pattern. So because it wasn't intended to be a fill pattern, it has no choice but to travel round and round and round. That's not Anita's fault. That's my fault for using the pattern as a fill pattern. So let's call a halt to that. I'm going to hit Control Z until I get my pattern back. And what I did on this one was take the pattern and go to Nodes and divide out each element of that pattern. It's a little bit more tedious to do it that way because you have to fill each one of those individually, but it was okay to me. It was worth it to be able to do that and get that look that I wanted behind the pattern. So that's something that you have to remember, and that's a choice that you have to make on whether you want to do it that way or not. I liked the overall look of it whenever I got through with it, so I was okay in doing it. I could have also used draw line and channel lock with the head of the machine and been able to use a piece of grid or my hopping foot to give it the same look that I did with this one, but it's okay. So that is basically row 1 for you. I'm going to go back to the final because it's easier. And that's the way that I did those 2 blocks in row 1. I hope you like this, and I hope that you like the things that I share with you on my design thoughts and my processes on this quilt. The next time we're going to do row 2, and we've got 3 blocks in row 2 that we're going to do, so we'll talk about those. Thank you.